Rad. Welcome, folks, to Practice Live. This is a monthly podcast that touches on what it takes to really be here. We've talked with folks from all over the world for the last 3 years, and today is a really special day because I have just really admired this person's brain for this last year. We have with us JK Ultra. I'm not even sure how I found your work. I'm not even sure. Something must have like popped through from Instagram because I'm not on TikTok. And the perspective that you're sharing, it may have been one of your White Rabbit series pieces from last year. And I just was caught off guard in the best way. I was caught off guard because you weren't just presenting like sort of a hollow side to like get some, in a quick interaction. You were really going deep and presenting a really broad opening for people to think for themselves. And I've just appreciated you ever since and have had a QHHT session with you, which actually changed the course of my life. And parts of that will probably come into this conversation because I'm noticing both of us are in a conversation of exiting identity. And a lot of what came up for me in the QHHT session touched on that. But before we get into any of that, I'd love to hand it over to you and have you briefly share what's important for us to know about you, where you're coming from, how you spend your time. Who are you?
Meg, thank you. I so appreciate that awesome intro. And it's been also so amazing getting to know you and talk with you over this last several months. And yeah, you're so insightful. So I'm excited to be doing this today. As far as describing myself, that's usually the hardest question. I could answer how the universe works, how everything is consciousness. The one I can answer, what is the matrix? I could answer all those questions. Usually the hardest question for me is to explain like who I am and what I do, because I don't see myself really fitting into a lot of the other types of people who are doing similar work to me. So I like to kind of look at myself a bit as an explorer, a guide. I do a lot of different things. I do content creation. I'm an author. My book came out this year. I live stream my podcast. I'm a crazy networker. Honestly, I should be like, that should be my real job title, is I network and meet people everywhere. But really what I like to do is I love doing deep dives. And really, I think kind of all of that distills to kind of what I do believe my gift is, which is to distill information or distill things into nice, simple, bite-sized type of help people click things. And, as I've been exploring some of the gene keys recently, which is very new to me, one of the things that it says about my kind of life purpose is it says all of these things are other people's lessons that I just help them distill and click into place, and that I'm going to, in my life, realize that none of it was really mine.
Ooh, that's rich. That's really rich. You're already touching on things that excite my mind. Like, I think it's easy for a lot of us who do what I would call community ministry, which is like any tending of people's inner lives or consciousness or, the subtle material of life. It's often easier for us to move into universal truths versus subjective truths. Like it's easier to talk about how the nature of reality than it is to like be in our own experience. So heard. And I would have to affirm from witnessing you pretty keenly for the last almost year, like explorer, guide, deep diver, and somebody who can distill things into simple bite-sized clips that are making the ineffable tangible, really like metabolizing things that are really often out of reach for all of us. And even those of us who are deep divers, that's the thing that I found most satisfying in encountering you, is that I'm a deep diver. Like,
You
I'm a
are.
deep and broad thinker. And I keep encountering, oh, I'm having an off-grid internet moment. Okay, there we go. I keep encountering facets that I'm chewing on in a new way through your sharing of stories of experience. That, like, it's not just we're always in beginner, but like it's not just in the beginning of the journey. It's like no matter where you are, there's room to always turn that and get even into more nuance.
I so agree. And, I love the nuance. I love these kind of taking these concepts that kind of have been foundation in spirituality and really kind of going a little deeper. And, one thing that I really enjoy is the perspective of like kind of integrating it into real life. So, there's been so much talk in the spiritual community as almost like we're going to buzz off of this existence into 5D, into this, into that. And, the real thing is bringing it to real life, to be a real person, to talk in a real way, to live a real experience as a human. So I think that that's kind of, what is teachers like you and different people are being called to really integrate these things into a way that it's not this spiritual bubble. It's not outside of the bigger community of the world. And, that's where I think maybe some of the astrological later planets, outer planets, I think right now some of those transitions are kind of pushing us towards like more real spiritual teachings.
That's rad. It's one of the motivations I have in this podcast. It's why it's called Practice Live, because this person came into this world a little monastic, like a little like internally structured, and have been I've been really diligent about staying present and awake, and it's beginning to loosen and soften. But yeah, really actually being here, like actually being here. And a teacher, this is not, I don't even need to reference this teacher because this is like a common thing, but I really understood it through this elder, that a lot of us are too heavenly minded to be of any earthly good. And
Mm.
what does it mean to actually be of earthly good? I feel like it's not just looking pretty and saying cool things while wandering in the woods. Like, we need the grit. We need sacrifice. Actually, that was the thing that's been tipped off for me in the last couple of days. I realized a couple of days ago that I've made a really big sacrifice in the last few years. I gave my womb over in a hysterectomy last year, which is not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have a child. And I've been sitting with this energy of that being a sacrifice for a bigger project of my life, which is not just serving community, it's actually ending lines of pain, abduction, and abuse. And what it takes to actually do intergenerational healing, and what it takes to act see of the wildest dreams that I have into fruition. It's required sacrifice, many sacrifices, but that was one that I've been like feeling into for the last couple of days. And I know that you're on a cusp of huge changes. Like huge changes, which I will let you speak about. But I'm curious if you are willing to include some energy of a word that the Western context does not like. We tend to like the word offering more than sacrifice. I'm curious if you have any words or stories of your experience to wrap around what that has looked like for you.
Well, kind of probably one of the biggest sacrifices that I've had in the recent couple of years has been stopping smoking. So I had been a cannabis smoker for over 20 years. And it really that was my practice. That was my only daily practice that I ever committed to. And so with that, it's fully been integrated in my life since I was 12 years old and every day for 23 years. And it's something that is different than other substances because it's not really detrimental, you know? Alcohol, it's obvious how that impacts you. All of these other things, it's obvious how it impacts you. And I actually had, and I think maybe it is partly true at some point, it probably was beneficial for me at a younger age. And I do think when I was younger, it really kept me to have this kind of overall, like kind of funny, lighthearted, laugh things off, let things go type of mentality, which I think was really good for my health. Because I do see people who maybe were in similar situations that didn't have a lot of stress in their body and a lot of, inflammation and things like that. So I was, releasing it all the time, laughing it off. But it did get to the point where I wouldn't say it was no longer enjoyable because it was always enjoyable, but it did start to get to a point where it was like, this is taking up such a huge space in my life. And I had more things to do. When I was just going to a job that I didn't like, it was great. Then when I started doing this work, I needed a lot more energy, time, clear headedness for this work. And then, I've just recently was married and then my husband's in the military. That's also something that probably wouldn't have been able to come into my life had I still been having that daily practice. So I think that that was probably like the greatest sacrifice of my life because it was the thing that I loved like the most, but it also allowed a lot more real love to come into my life. And it really it was a journey though. It wasn't like, "Oh, okay, I just decided to quit one day and it was that easy." I went back and forth for about like 3 years of stopping and starting and stopping and smart starting. So, I think sometimes, something that we really love but is not serving us is a good sacrifice, and then a sacrifice that I'm having now, which is leaving LA. And also, another, like, thing that is going to leave such a huge opportunity to space to be filled with more love, more creativity, more time, more energy, and so that's where I'm at right now with this, like, kind of big sacrifice, but because of what happened with the smoking, I feel like, "Oh, this is gonna be filled with something even greater because I didn't even know what was on the other side of not smoking." And everybody has their own journey, not saying everybody else has to. What I should have done was change my relationship with it 15 years ago, and I wouldn't have had to have such a big sacrifice. So I'm not saying everybody has to stop doing it. I mean, there's plenty of people who can enjoy it in a normal way.
Yes. Wow. There's again so much that you just touched on that I want to suss out. Um, Man, the things that we do when we're doing things that we don't really want to be doing. Like I could get away with it when I had a job that I didn't really love, and when I wanted to open up into more creativity, more love, more intimacy, more depth, it required this of me. Another piece that you touched on that I think is really important about practice is what I would call courtship of practice. That like it's not. I feel like there are achievement practices in which like you decide
Mhm.
something and then you do what you need to do that. Like I want to play Carnegie Hall. I'm gonna motherfucking play piano every single day for 3 hours in order to be proficient enough, and not only just proficient skill wise, but actually like evocative enough to land that gig. So practice, not instead of, but in addition to, um, the alchemy of practice, like where I
Mhm.
feel like it's a bit of a low and slow devotional path and requires courtship. Like it's not, I've decided to quit smoking because I know it's bad for me. It's like, what happens if I titrate more love, more creativity, more time, more agency of like how I want to spend that time and what I want to do with that time towards my dreams? And that includes a back and forth. That's like, it's not here I am, I'm landing, this is it, let's go. It's like I want to get to know you, and I'm going to have to get to know myself and what I don't know about myself in order to know you. Life,
Mhm. Mhm.
love, creativity. So, yeah, I'm curious if anything is coming up for you about, what I'm calling courtship, but you might have different language for around practice, um, around that back and forth.
So I was thinking about some things around practice before doing this. And from what I know of you and your life is the way you've been painting every single day for like ever and like never missed a day. And, you know, that is beautiful practice. And like I said, really, smoking was the only thing I've done every day. There is nothing I've done every single day. I mean, I would like to say that I've brushed my teeth every single day. There's days even that has not happened. So I think really I mean, I've gone to the bathroom every single day, but like aside from that, there is one thing that I've recently been digging into deeper is human design. And one thing that was very like aha in looking through human design was the gates. So there's, gate 5 and gate 15, which are these, daily practice, repetition, development through, oh no, sorry, gate 16. So 5 and 16 are both like around daily habits, doing things you're not good at, having joy at getting good at something. Now, for me, both of those are not defined. That is not, and so, there's things like Joe Dispenza, Atomic Habits, Deep Work. And I realized all of these people, I don't have their human design. But if I looked, I'm sure they have both gate 5 and gate 16 defined. I'm sure you do for sure, because they're to paint every single day, you have to have that. So then for me, I have struggled with daily practice. Like I have waves of practice. Maybe I'll meditate for a while. Maybe I won't meditate for 3 months. I'm gonna maybe do breath work. Maybe I'm not gonna do it for a year. I wrote my book, but it took 10 years because these waves. So I actually have gate 15, which is the other side of 5, defined, which is the gate of extremes. So this is the extreme work. This is being like, I can write 80,000 pages in 3 days, and then I can't look at the book again for another year, which is why it took 10 years. In total, I probably only spent like 2 months on the book, but that 2 months was spaced out over 10 years because I'll go in 12 hours, 15 hours, 8-hour day, nonstop, and then I cannot even look at it again. So, I think that's another thing with some people who struggle with daily practice, because we look at all these things like every single spiritual teacher, every single master of anything, every single successful person, they're like, get in there every day, do something every day. And that feels to me like prison, and it will just go away. So, that's what I think is also important when we're looking, because then that's just who you are by design. So then just to know that. Also, this whole like kind of personal development, the repetition, I don't have that defined, which is why I don't like to do stuff I'm not good at. I know immediately if I'm good at something and then I want to do it again. If I do it and I suck at it, actually I probably know beforehand that I'm not going to be good at it. If I try and I'm not good at it, I don't find joy in continuously practicing something that I'm not good at. It's not for me. So that's where I think kind of understanding yourself is a really important thing when it comes to practice, because a lot of people want to say like, "Oh, it's ADHD, it's neurodivergence," and maybe that is the case for some people. But that is diagnosing a personality type, and it's like, maybe you look at your human design and that's just not defined in you. So that's just something, that's an area where you open and receive energy. So now having a practice is an open receiving place. I'm hit with the inspiration to do it versus like, I'm never going to be like Joe Dispenza. I'm never going to be like the Atomic Habits guy. I'm never going to be like the deep work guy. I'm never going to be those people who, does something every day. And also understanding interpersonally, maybe you're in a relationship with someone who does have that defined. And then you understand the importance of them needing that daily habit, of them needing that thing, even if it doesn't seem like something that is something that needs to be done every day. They need to do something every day. So I think that that's kind of the thing that sticks out for me with practice the most is how everybody is different and that you're literally just this is your blueprint.
Baller. That was awesome. Um, so I definitely have I think I have gate 16 defined. I looked into that recently where I was like, totally that. Um, and it's not rigid. A thing um most of the people in my life are not built like me with practice. They're not doing this thing every day for 10 years or some shit like I have. um but what about committing to a quality that's riding underneath? What if
Mhm.
it's like I'm committing to a quality of self-improvement. I'm committing to a quality of um, opening myself up to both receiving and offering, and not just one end of that. Because often
Mhm.
people will lean on receiving when there's a deficiency there, but because there's like shadow muck in the way, it ends up actually complicating the whole thing. I'm like, what if like offering is also part of that commitment? So
Mhm.
yeah, I've been like tending this conversation even with myself. Like I didn't start by deciding to do something every day. I started by 15 years of messing around to feel into the quality that I was really able to commit to. And that underpins my practice. Like that has actually been the motivator for me to express that in some way. And it is loosely defined at this point. Like for 2,740 days, because I know I made a painting every day because that's what I needed to like really jumpstart it. But like since then, I've been unwinding and like if I touch the page of myself while using this number 2 pencil on this paper, that counts for my practice because that's the point. It's not about making a painting every day or even painting every day. That was just my vehicle to get some of this energy I have in my body out. Um, I love what you're talking about of like understanding yourself is for me the point of practice. Like
Mhm.
again, there's achievement practices of like you have a goal and you like do things to get there. But for me, the alchemy of practice is actually like getting to know myself more. And particularly because I was that kid that didn't smoke, who had a bunch of stuff lodged in my body, and needed to figure out how to move it out in a joyful way. So practice was kind of my drug for 8 years. Well, really 15 plus 8. And now it's a companion. It's moved into a nuanced allyship versus it being there's no discipline, there's no nun in the back of the room like waiting with her ruler to like slap my wrists if I don't do it a certain way, like even in myself. So yeah, quality. Like if you were to commit to a quality that's not doing the same thing every day, maybe there's like 20 activities that meet that.
Right.
Like maybe it is breath work that happens twice a year or writing for 8-hour stints or meditation. Maybe it's a quality of noticing and like shifting your sight as you're taking a walk in an urban environment and noticing the people and how they're elegantly moving around. Like, yeah, shifts of perspective. Yeah, I'm curious if that brings anything up for you, like committing to a quality versus a task.
Right. I think overall kind of betterment, like kind of like an ever moving betterment, like always kind of trying to improve some aspect of something. Like it could be betterment of myself, but also it could be like kind of seeing a quality in other people or, being understanding. So I think kind of I would say kind of the thing that consistently is going to like more of like a place of like peace, neutrality, things like that, and of course some days I get off. Sometimes, like my hormones are out of whack and I'm just like, you know what? Screw that person. That person's a dick. So like but yeah, as far as like I would probably no, I would probably say like the quality that I'm very committed to is authenticity. And I think that that does kind of outside of peace neutrality, like throw that aside actually, because the authenticity is like, okay, if I feel like, being judgmental that day, like I feel judgmental of something, I'm not going to talk myself out of being judgmental. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is not spiritually enlightened. Oh, I should accept everybody. Oh, this is their situation. Like, no, if I'm feeling judgmental of something, I will talk some shit. And so I think authenticity is the best for me. I say that that's probably the quality that I do commit to every day. And sometimes that does lead me towards peace and neutrality. And sometimes it leads me towards, um, a version of myself that gets triggered, that gets upset about things, that feels offended or slighted by something stupid, So like I think yeah, it's probably authenticity is the quality. And I think that kind of gets lost in the authenticity conversation is the other side is like yeah, authenticity isn't only like, oh, it's bad to have hard feelings. Oh, I shouldn't be upset about this. Or, oh, this is like not worthy of my energy. And it's like, no, actually, I'm annoyed by it. It might be a parking spot. It might be something I saw online. It might be a comment that I saw on some other video that has nothing to do with me that triggered me. So, yeah, I would say authenticity is the quality.
I totally dig that. I totally dig that because this is another facet of this conversation that I've been witnessing you have, and then I've been witnessing in myself really deeply and in my practice of like fluidity of self having a broader range of movement. I feel like a lot of the spiritual conversation is so oh, this is so relevant to practice. I'm appreciating how this thought is popping into my head right now. Goal setting practice, right? So like a lot of us have this, not a lot of us, there's like a tone in the current spiritual Western context about like ascension, and that like ascension is a static place that you reach, and you know all else of who you are and what's possible like kind of melts away into some utopic heaven, essentially. And I feel like part of what's possible for me that I'm beginning to witness is like fluid access to those realms,
Mhm.
more access to those realms, but it's not instead of being human in all of the ways, the petty, the pissed, the bitchy, the hormonal, the like righteous rage, like all of these things that get like bad rep because it's not compassionate enough, it's not kind enough, it's not Mary Magdalene wandering in the forest with her lantern. Like the current aesthetic spiritual Instagram. Um, it's grittier than that. It requires the grit. This is an experience that requires friction, and we're not going to erase, and we actually don't want to erase the friction. We want do you guys enjoy having, good times with other people? It requires friction. Like all of the some of the best things of this human experience require friction, and we're not going to really be satisfied without it. So what if instead of it being like a this or that, like a I'm spiritual or I'm a greedy dirt kid, like what if
Right.
it's
And
all of it?
there's so much like, people in the space who really project themselves as this kind of Mary Magdalene and all of these things. And it's like they're giving a false, first of all, either they're definitely lying to you and they probably are lying to themselves as well, because maybe they really do see themselves that way, or it's just an act. But like the thing is like they're doing such a disservice to the community because what they're doing is they're saying like, "You're not there yet. You're not good enough. I am superior to you." And it's like a lot of that gets kind of mixed, like lost in the sauce of the ascension talk because it's like, no, this is really just weird spiritual hierarchy, which is completely irrelevant. I mean, also why, I'm not really into the ascended master thing, which I know triggers people. I think everybody is an ascended master. And There's only one. Everybody's an ascended master. There's nobody that is above another person. Now, we might do this in our human world, but as a soul, the worst person doing the worst things on this planet is equal to you. The best person doing the best things on this planet is equal to you. Everybody is the same amount of God, the same amount of source, the same amount of soul energy. Maybe part of it is here, maybe part of it is aware, part of it is unaware. There's no, so this whole like ascension and like I've transcended like, and I really went off on this on my live about a month ago, was like the Aubrey Marcus stuff and how like them having the polyamorous relationship, refusing to call it poly, but then kind of his wife, Vailana, really making it seem that it's like something so unhealed within herself that still needs to be addressed, to not want her husband to get another woman pregnant when they've committed and made vows to each other, to be with each other. And it's like, that is the stuff of the spiritual stuff. Yes, triggers are signals. And yes, we do need to get through these triggers. And when something comes up, it is telling us something inside of ourselves. But then there is also the far end of the spectrum where not wanting to like maybe share your husband with someone else and have a harem of multiple babies, and whatever, have a community type of thing where he's getting all these people pregnant. It's also acceptable to be like, this trigger is a line for me. And that's okay. And it doesn't mean I still need to transcend and heal deeper to the point where I feel no emotion, I feel no triggers again. So that's what I think too, is kind of gets lost in it. Like, oh, I'm not allowed to get upset or angry or hurt about something. So it's like really finding that nuanced balance of like, yeah, the small triggers we do want to work through, and some of the big triggers we want to work through because it is disrupting us. But it doesn't mean that we should not feel them like ever again.
Yes, I 100% am with you in everything you just said. Um, Man, bypassing natural emotions is really dangerous. There are natural emotions, like the natural emotion of anger says, "I'm being breached." And if we are not allowed to feel anger, then we're not going to be in the energy of recognition of when we're breached, nor
Mm,
have the life force energy to actually like pronounce that and then work within that as like as an agreement, as a boundary. So it's really important for us to have access to the natural emotions. I would also say this about ego, not to contrast something that I'm seeing somebody post in the text thread, but somebody said, "No lies, only the truth plus leave the ego behind." Just saying. Um, I feel like the ego, I actually really love Elizabeth Gilbert's take on an old Hindi adage of like, my ego doesn't drive the car. It's not the navigator. It's not picking the music. It's sitting in the back seat enjoying the ride. I really like that because I consider the ego the storyteller. And what I've noticed in my, laboratory of my life is that like when my ego is supported, it tells a very different story of expansion. Like anything is possible. When it's not supported, it tells the story of limitation and control. Not much is possible.
mm,
So what does it take to actually support the ego so that the storyteller actually gets to mostly sit in the back of the car and enjoy the ride, not in a diminutive like lesser than position. It's just that's the stance. It's the stance to not have the ego like crapped on by the elephant or like directing where the elephant goes, because it's going to be more limited than if you allow life to collaborate with you. And I feel like that's one of the biggest desires that a lot of us have, is to really feel the intimacy of life collaborating with us, and for us to be active in that collaboration and not just passively wait. I saw Mami Oneme's post a little while ago of like, a lot of us are just waiting for the magic, but like we have to meet that magic and actually show and share our magic in that. Like it's not it's not a one way, oh yeah, kind of deal. It's a practice of meeting.
Mhm. Yeah, I think like a really good example of that is, something when it comes to like the reincarnation stuff is like a good general example. So like there's kind of it really depends on the ego, which is kind of like you're saying is kind of almost like the can be the narrator of the story. And, so there's kind of these two schools of thought that are very active in the spiritual space around it. That one is, it's completely a choice. You're coming here to experience. Some people believe it's to learn lessons. Some people believe it's just experience, whatever variation of that. And that you're in charge. You've chosen this. You're here to experience this. And then there's the other side of it, which is like, this is a prison planet. You are recycled. There are archons, demons, reptilians, all these bad beings that are forcing you to continue to incarnate into this prison. And like, that's what I think is like a good kind of perception of what the ego can do is that's what makes it in the back seat or in the driver's seat. If the ego is like really activated, then it's like, oh, I need to escape this. I need to fight this. This needs to be slayed. I need to overcome it. And then there's the other side, which is like, oh, everything that's happening to me is happening for me. So I can look at all of these things and try to not remove myself, but gain a higher perspective on maybe why did this need to happen? Why is this happening? What is this trying to show me? What is this a reflection of? So I think that that's kind of like a good, easy way because it's a lot, those are general groups that kind of have these strong beliefs around that are both in the same place with similar kind of core information, but then the perspective and the perception leads them down two different paths.
Yeah, opposites often end up being they're not the same, but they weigh the same. It could be said that they weigh the same. And I heard a teacher, I forget where who, so maybe I'll find that. But I heard a teacher talking about extremes and on the ends of politics, which I don't necessarily want to get into politics, but this is just a really like accessible example of where we tend to go in extremes. That end of that spectrum is really toxic if it's like so excessive without meeting somewhere in the middle. And I maybe resonate with your peace and neutrality. Like it's not neutrality like no opinion. It's not neutrality like silence or abstinence or something or like complacency. It's neutrality like I am here with with the possibilities and to like bring threads in with integrity, towards this central threshold, which is a pretty broad threshold. It's not like
Mhm.
it's not it's not really confining, which brings me back to a thing you said a little while ago about identity being a prison. You touched a little bit about this, like, and I kind of want to go back to it if that's cool. I've been feeling so much into acts of identity. Literally, like things that we hear people say, I'm a kind of person who does this or doesn't do that or whatever. Um, I'm curious if there's any more you have to say about that because it's just it's so alive in the current context. Like a lot of us are waking up to this space of what or who am I if I'm not a kind of person?
Mm. I love this topic because it is like, something that's unfolding in my life a lot at this time. But, you know, identity, I was talking about this the other day on my live is that like identity is not rooted in the now. It is rooted in the past of all the stuff that happened, all the things, the good, the bad, the ugly, but usually the traumatic things is very much what we're defining ourselves by. We're rarely defining ourselves as often by like that thing that I won, that thing that this. We define the type of person we are by these past events. And then the other half of identity is, what am I becoming? What am I meant to do? What is this? What am I going to contribute? What am I going to this? What am I going to that? What will this become? What will I achieve? My goals. Neither of these things are in the now. So when we're in the now, we have a lot of fluidity to be anything we want. So, if we're just in the now, we're just two women having a conversation that we're streaming to the internet. It's not all of the things. It's not everything that happened to us or everything we will do. And this is how we like allow our identity to breathe. The other aspect that I really like around identity is we see ourselves through other people's eyes. So a practice, this is a good one. I got a practice that I've been doing is allowing myself to see, and I think this comes back to the more neutrality, is allowing myself to see people more than what they are presenting, or more than what they've done, or more than what they're saying, or more than even their potential, their past, their whatever. So like that's how people grow, is they need the freedom to be seen as more than what they are. And this is what we, and this is funny because it also kind of comes back to the Aubrey Marcus stuff. Because before I had done the breakdown of kind of just talking shit about it and being in my authentic judgmental self that day, like a week before, my video was really about like, oh, I see them as like a couple that has put themselves out there as kind of an example of a healthy spiritual couple. So it messes with my identity of who they are, but I want people to be able to see me as something that can grow. I want to, I had the conversation with my husband of like, we both want to grow and change. So we need to be able to see each other as more, especially in our intimate relationships, see that person as being able to grow. But then also with public figures, we have to be able to see them as someone who is more than what they're just doing right now, or have done, or can be, or what we think of them, because that gives people the safety to be more when we see them as more. So what we want for ourselves is to be allowed to grow. So we have to allow ourselves to see other people as more. Like maybe, let's say, your partner doesn't like spicy food. And then one day you go out and there is something that's a little spicy. And then we're kind of like, oh, I didn't think you'd like that. It's a little spicy. Like little small things like that push people back into their boxes, as opposed to just allowing them the space to be like, oh, did you like it? Oh, cool. And just letting that breathe instead of putting people back in the box. Like say someone who like isn't comfortable dancing, and then they kind of like get a little groove going on, and then you're like, "Oh, look." And it's like we're not doing it out of trying to put them in the box. We're trying to be like, "Oh, I'm seeing you do something out of your comfort zone." But then that like cramps them back up into like, and that happens. These are very small ways, but that's the way. We're not talking about changing the whole world. We're talking about like maybe a parent is a little bit more aware one day and had some self-awareness about something, that instead of being like, oh, well, now you get what I've been saying, because our own ego wants to validate I was right. And it's like these are the small practices that we can do to allow people to grow. And that does get mirrored when we're doing that. It means that we're allowing ourselves to grow, but not behind the kind of person you are, the kind of person who doesn't like spicy food, the kind of person who, reacts this way. So it's like these small practices. And then if we're doing it for other people, it means we're already allowing ourselves to become more.
Yes. Small acts really do change the world, though. There's a tone, I noticed this because I've noticed this since 7 because I started college like right then. And a lot of us, like literally the month after I started college, 9/11 happened. And a lot of folks went into like save the world mode.
Mm.
And it's when I like doubled down on having a practice, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure that the actual change comes from these really small acts that become us. We eventually become those things. So this small act of seeing people in our lives as more than what they're presenting, actually, I really feel, and this is going to maybe sound like an extreme statement, but I've noticed it for myself. It actually may unwind many generations of junk to be witnessed in the present. You had a in one of your Tuesday Night Lives, you said this thing and it really stuck with me. Like, what if the devil is like no longer in hell or in the sixth dimension, but we keep calling him back there because we need that contrast. We need that identity, that story in order to anchor
Mhm.
ourselves in being good. And a
Right.
lot of us are really subconsciously, really subtly projecting things onto the people most intimate relationships in our lives in order to keep our own narrative with
Mhm.
enough that it's perceivable. And it really is scary. It can be scary to ask ourselves, who am I? What am I without my two small stories? That's really what the QHHT experience did for me. For those of you who don't know, Jen may be on a break for a little while as she's making a big move, but Jen does QHHT sessions, and it's an exceptional offering. It's an exceptional offering. It changed my life because I put the way that I've defined myself through trauma, through pain stories, through the spiritual interruptions, the things that I could never have expected, things that I've made, things that I've had agency and control over, ways that I've been at the mercy of others. It all got put into one place. And then I had a way to see outside of that for a minute and
Mhm.
approach a tension that I've been, I had a layer of awakening happen probably 15 years ago, and I've been like riding out this tension of like solving the problem, the reconciling the past lives, reconciling the truth. And what I found after the QHHT session, which so amplified a specific thread, like such a specific thread of that conversation for me, is that I've been able to unwind having any attachment to any of it. It all kind of went away. Like it kind of like the tension that was trying to reconcile of like, how am I special? How am I like, what am I bringing? What am I here to do? Who am I supposed to be? How do these things that have happened to me, like, what is it? What matters about that? Like it kind of dissolved, particularly in the last 3 months. Like the stories dissolved, like something in me really deeply relaxed. And I don't know who I am anymore in the best way. And as somebody who spent my entire life like looking towards self mastery, it's been really profound to recognize mastery in total surrender and not knowing who I am. Like I'm for instance, and I know I've been talking for a little bit too long, but a few months ago, I was going to a retreat because I hired a coach this year for the first time, and it's like the most expensive thing I've ever done. And I flew first class, and I haven't announced this in any way because I noticed that I felt shy of like, I'm not a kind of person who would spend excess money on a seat where they treat you like a human. Like where all other seats are basically like bucket dumpster seats, and like first class is like what, like a human experience of flying. But it was in congruence with what I was going to do. Like I needed to make the edgy choice. And it's not like flying first class is the standard for me anymore. It's that choice expanding into the ability to make a choice that reflected what I was doing and what the edge I was experimenting with. That became an important piece of congruence, of alignment, of truth. That I am not a kind of person who needs to be scrappy all the time or that needs to like whatever, hide under a rock. I can come out, I can be seen, I can be in that position, and I can be kind in it and meet, people walking by me in the aisle with, with warmth, instead of like, don't look at me. So yeah, identities as prisons and permission to see ourselves and each other in more. And what happens when we don't call the devil in to that old throne in order to satisfy
Mm.
our own narratives? Because what if it's not actually, the devil's narrative anymore?
Right. And, kind of also tagging on to what you're saying about the first class thing, another aspect that is kind of coming up for me is I had been vegetarian for about 13 years. And part of the reason why I stopped eating meat, well, the reason I stopped eating meat was because I saw the movie Food Inc. and I saw the cruelty, the factory farming, the antibiotics that are in it, the quality, the everything. And I mean, that movie doesn't just attack meat. It's like I was even afraid to eat vegetables. I was afraid to drink water. Like it was like every aspect of food. I think I just saw that there's a second one coming out. I'm like, no, 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 no. I just healed from the last one. I just finally got over the last one. Don't come out with a sequel now. But at that time, that was a pivotal point of my spiritual journey. So I also was hearing a lot of the messages around like higher vibration, spirituality, awakening, ascension. You can't eat these things. And so for in my 20s, it was totally fine to have no protein basically. Like in your 20s, you could literally live on Red Bull, you could live on cocaine. Like in your 20s, you can live on anything. So like now that I'm in my 30s, I do feel the difference of nourishment in my body and food and the importance of a balanced diet. And so I had been getting the message for a while last year in meditation of like, you're going to have to start eating meat soon. And and I did feel like, it was hard for me to work out because then after I work out, you're hungry. But then because I wasn't getting enough of what I needed, and I mean, of course, anybody can say all the proteins and blah, 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 and this and that. I already know all the stuff about it. I still was being ravenously hungry. So it was making me not want to work out because then I would have to eat so much and I wasn't satiated. And also too, hormonal changes after 35 has changed a lot in how the type of food and what I need. And so I started getting the message in meditation that I was gonna have to start eating meat, but not for my health, for my identity. And so I was sitting with that and I was like, well, like, what does that mean? And it was like, well, you see yourself as somebody who doesn't eat meat. And you're gonna be traveling more. You're gonna be in situations, which I already had been. There's plenty of times over the last years before that I had been in situations where there was no vegetarian option, so I just wouldn't eat. And it puts you a lot of times in a bad position because you might be traveling and super exhausted and super depleted, and then you're just eating like a cracker or bread or something and not getting any sustenance. So that was like, it was like, okay, so one aspect of it is you're going to be traveling and you need to make sure that you have enough energy and you're not depleting yourself. The other side is like, why did you truly stop eating meat? And I was like, okay, well, the movie Food Inc. And then it was like, okay, well, go one step further. Why? And it was like, well, because of the factory farming, because all this bad stuff. And it was like, oh, so what? Because you're a good person? Because are you the type? And then I was like, okay. And also, I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to feel guilty. Oh, okay. So are you the person who makes decisions to avoid guilt, to avoid shame, to avoid feeling bad? Do you wanna keep living your life as someone who makes decisions out of avoiding negative emotions? Do you want to keep depleting your body because you're a good person? Because, like, is that what a good person does? A good person self-sacrifices their own health, goes and travels, and then I went to Utah, and I went on my friend was like, "Oh, it's gonna be easy hike." It was not an easy hike. I was up to here in water, and I was fighting for my life, and then afterwards, we went to eat, and of course, in Utah, there's just not as many vegetarian options as California, so the only thing I could eat was, like, some pizza, so it was like bread and cheese was not really what I felt good eating after that, and there was, like, a lot of bread, a lot of just carbs, and I was n feeling more and more depleted throughout this trip, and then I knew I was going to Peru soon, and I was like, I already know I'm gonna go to Peru and there's not gonna be vegetarian options always available. And so that was when then I made the decision to start like kind of, okay, I'm going to take a little bite, see how my stomach reacts. I almost had a panic attack the first time I took a bite of meat because it was also like letting go of like, you know, and also this like ascension stuff and being a good person. And it's all these other things. And then after I started eating meat again, I was like free. Like I can go eat anything anywhere. And what I was going to do is I was like, okay, well, I'm only going to eat really good quality and I'm not going to eat pork. And then I'm like, what am I doing? I'm creating more restrictions and limitations, which is not the experience that I'm meant to have here on earth. I'm not meant to live here with these constant restrictions on myself to what? Be more like somehow spiritually superior to somebody else? Like, or, and that's not what I was thinking consciously, but really when I started to dissect it, it's like, why? Like, and now it's crazy. I don't have any guilt around the process of meat, around food, around anything. I had more guilt not eating it, not engaging with it all the time, floating around my ether than being like, and cows are still my favorite animal. I love cows. I love cows. They're the sweetest, purest, most wise, strong animal. I love them. And it's like, I feel totally okay with like, okay, we're all here. We're all having an experience. The cows are also here having an experience. They're okay. Everything is okay. Everyone is okay.
All is well, and all is well, and all manner of things shall be well. Words by an Anchoress nun who lived in the time of the plague. So it's not like it's not like fluffy stuff. It's like, no, really, what if all is well and all manner of things shall be well?
Mhm.
Um, oh man. Okay, right. So I've heard you name two practices. One practice is to expand the sight. That's my summation of that. Like expand your sight
Mm.
of yourself and others more than what you're presenting and what they're presenting, to allow a broader sense of permission of what's possible, to expand beyond assumptive identities.
Mm.
Another practice that I just heard you say is go one step further. And for me, the words that I have for that are what's underneath that? Okay. What's
Mm.
underneath that? Okay. And like that, again, it feels like a courtship practice. Like it's not
Mhm.
like you're ever going to be done. Of which case I have a lot to say about that in regards to like what marriage is, but that's maybe another conversation we could have at some future point. Um, I love that you just touched on this process of letting go of little deaths. Like there's the little death of the self that arrived in meditation of like you're going to need to start eating meat and you're like and then like the progression of like taking small bites and then moving into a full death of the, JK Ultra as a vegetarian. Um, and actually the death of the guilt that was there more when you weren't eating meat than it is now. That feels like such an important piece of mechanics, which is why I'm relaying it again, because um there's a tension that happens in lack. There's a tension that happens in lack that like when we can open ourselves up, it might look like bypass to an outsider. And maybe you have words on this. What do you know about this relief from guilt not being bypass
Mhm.
now that you are
Mhm.
eating meat?
Right. So, because it's the hard thing to do versus bypassing is the easy thing to do. Bypassing is like, you know, like say for example, being upset about something or just even the example of the meat. Like let's say someone did something to you or someone said something and it hurt your feelings. The bypassing is the kind of easy way of being like, well, they're hurting, so I'm just going to be the good person here because I understand what they're going through. They're working through stuff, but because I'm done working through stuff, I can just see where they're at. Whereas the relieving of guilt or emotions or anger or triggers or whatever that is not the bypassing is being like, damn, that really pissed me off. Why did that piss me off so much? Why? What do I need to sit with? Is this like hurting my ego? Does this make me think about, am I not a good person? Am I not spiritually there enough? Am I not ascended enough? Have I not actually healed all the stuff that I've been trying to heal for all these years that I knew I was done with that just keep coming back? So it's like, I think that's the difference between the bypass is usually the bypassing a lot of times gets, if it's with another person, gets deflected onto the other thing or deflected to like, I'm a good person. And then the other side is kind of like, does this make me not a good person, to get deep into this and to acknowledge I really am mad. I really am jealous. I really am upset.
Totally. Um, I really appreciate your your you're a little jester. You and I both have this. So like like trickster's authority is outside of human. So there's a little spirit theater here when Jen moves into this voice of like, oh, and I just wrote down these words of like padded room spirituality. Like it feels like it feels there's like I feel like there's an invitation for many of us individually, which is going to move into the collective, which I can't help but see, because even though part of my work this year has been actually accepting that I have subjective truth, I've been so annoyed by the words "my truth," and I'm like, oh my god, okay, but like, where does that end? It never does. And it's tended to be safer for me to lean into universal truths or objective truths, and that was a bypass for me. That ended up being a form of bypass. Like moving only into objective or universal truths was a form of bypass of my truth. Um, and I'm still, as you can maybe hear in my tone, a little annoyed by it still. But like, but there's a facet here that you just touched on of like clarity. And this moves into this this tenet of authenticity being a quality that you're committed to. Like that clarity of like, I'm pissed and I'm going to let myself be pissed because I am pissed. And that's,
Mhm.
I think we need more of that, like less padded room, less buffer from our experience, less buffer from subjective truth, but also not just hanging out in subjective truth, which is tricky because a lot of us are navigating like postmodern apocalyptic Christianity. um, like like the remnants of it. I think a lot of the tone of the current Western context, spirituality is like remnants. It's like echoes, like residues of prior paths. It can't help but not be. And I'm curious about what's emergent, as in how can we touch on what's come before, but actually be present to what's unfolding. And yeah, that's so required me to not be afraid of bypass, which has been bypassing. And it's like such a weird trap. And to like let go of who I think I am. Because as
Mhm.
much as I like to make fun of the person who's like, oh, you're hurting, I'm going to value you over myself, I have been the kind of person who has been that person. I have been that person. Um, and getting more clear and more real is, I don't know, that's like the name of the game right now.
And there is
Um,
truth in that too. There
yeah.
is truth in that because, also people who have hurt us, we do have to accept that they were hurting. And so it's, there is, but what it's really about, like, the acceptance of, like, the self in the situation, because it is true. Anybody who's hurting anybody is hurting. Like, in when you hurt other people, you hurt yourself. So it's not to say that that is not in truth. Even, I mean, all the kind of spiritual bypassy stuff is in truth partly. It's the not truth to the self that is the part. They're saying truth about a lot of things, like, oh, you chose your lessons in this life, or you chose these experiences, or, we learn from the villains of our life, things like that. Those are truths. What it is the truth with the self, which is where it becomes bypassy. And that's, I think, where it comes off as inauthentic, because two people could say the same thing. I've talked a lot about the stuff with my father, and it's like, yeah, my father is a hurting person who's still hurting now. And that's why they continue to live this way. Whereas, other things like, kind of not accepting too, like, say like the bypassy part would be like, that also hurt me. That also led me to do a lot of things that were my own decisions, which, yeah, were because I felt maybe unworthy, unvalued, unlovable, led me to make a lot of decisions that put myself in worse situations with people who were also hurting, and who were then to re traumatize or things like that. And so I think it's really a lot about self-honesty and self-honesty. We all think we're being honest with ourselves, but then we become more honest with ourselves and we realize how much we weren't. And then you do another layer of it and then you realize how much you weren't. Everybody thinks they're authentic. Nobody thinks they're a liar, full of shit, phony. Like nobody thinks that.
Woo! Right? I actually said that yesterday. I was like, man, I have been full of shit. And it was so actually like joyful to really arrive at seeing that. And um to arrive now, I'm definitely, probably is not even true. I'm definitely going to arrive at another layer of like, oh man, that was good job, kid, but you're full of shit. Like, because there's always more. I feel like another piece of this ascension symptom is like like an actual ascension symptom, not like my bones ache. Like a symptom of like only being ascension minded, heavenly minded. Um, oh, I lost it. Crap. Oh, we think we're gonna get rid of our shadows. The cool thing about shadows though is that our gifts are there. And the more that I've really allowed myself to face and turn towards all of that material, and to loosen a little bit of like narratives around that material of like this happened and they did that and that person and right, like they, and I understand why they hurt me, but not acknowledging that I was hurt. I really appreciate that as a piece that you just brought into this conversation. um yeah. Oh, I lost it again. My brain is like beginning to like putter, but crap, maybe you can pick it up. Where was
Well, I
I
think
going?
it comes back to the identity stuff that we were talking about, is that like, allowing people to be more than what we think we are, allowing ourselves to be more than what we think we are. Also, it kind of all comes back into that same thing where it's not like we can say it like, jokingly, like, oh, I was full of shit with that. But it's like we've actually allowed ourselves to become more. And, in my personal life in the last 6 months, meeting my husband. And then that has allowed me and him to both be more. And a lot of other people see that in my life, so like a lot of people are like, oh my God, like you've changed so much. And it's like, we, when we see people that for more than what they are, it makes it safe for them to express that part of themselves, because we all have all within us. So if you're the kind of person who's not affectionate, you're the kind of person who's just not this or just doesn't like that, it's usually that there's not enough safety to be that. So, and if we see it in other people, if we see that in ourselves, if we allow ourselves to step out, so much has changed in me, me being able to be more feminine because my husband sees me as feminine, so that took like a little bit of time, not too much time. Everything's moving very quickly, but like it took a tiny little bit of time for me to be like, oh, okay, it's safe for me to be feminine now. Whereas my whole life I've had to be in the masculine. So this is like allows my identity to bloom. So, I wasn't being full of shit before by being in the masculine. It was very much who I was, but now I'm allowed by myself and by the safety of the container that has been created by the masculine to allow me to be like, "Oh, actually, I can express this part of myself safely. So, in some ways, maybe some of these spiritual bypassing people, this is where I come back to the neutrality and to the understanding. I'll play in judgment. I like to play in judgment and jest, but then I'll also like to play in, like, is it truly safe for these people? And I know this for myself because it was not safe for me to be weak. It wasn't safe for me to be hurt. It wasn't safe for me to be traumatized. It wasn't safe for me to be a victim. So I never identified with any of those things, even though those types of actions had taken place in my life, times where I was weak, time where I was vulnerable, times where I was a victim, times where I was very hurt. But it wasn't safe for me until about a year ago, a year and a half ago, to accept and feel those things. So at the same time, as much as, spiritual bypassing is something funny to make fun of, it's also like this person is genuinely not safe enough to be weak, to be vulnerable, to be hurt, to be um honest about something with themselves.
Totally. Totally. Um, Something that this coach that I'm working with, Drea, has said a number of times in this last, whatever, 6 months, "My expansion expands others." So as
Mhm.
we a and so, right, so, like, there's circuitry in relationships, and when people see you shifting, you, like, opening the palette of your wardrobe to to new colors instead of black. Um, for me, like flying first class, or like even like, allowing myself to be seen more publicly by moving my podcast to YouTube instead of having it sequestered in a private community for 2.5 years. Um, yeah, like that becomes a field of permission that's not about like power permission. It's not like I
Mhm.
grant you permission. It's that it becomes an offering of what's
Mhm.
possible, and then it feeds itself, right? So you and your husband are both, like, in a circuit of expansion, which is just gonna keep reverberating, and redefining. And this isn't a shame on bypassing. Again, I take ownership of the places that I've bypassed, and it really was also because I wasn't safe. And I also think that there are facets of bypass that are not toxic.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and we've touched a little bit on this, but like a shape that came, like a poetic, like a mythopoetic shape that came in the last few months about this is like, if our trauma is a burning mountain, if our stories of experience are a burning mountain, and there's like under caves, and there's, cave systems that move all the way up, and there's maybe a mouth of a cave at the very top where you can like look out, like there's different stages in this burning mountain. um, it's a way that I name the dark night of the soul, which I feel like is
Mhm.
continually visiting us. It's not like a state that is um, achieved once and, done. And I
Mhm.
don't tend to call it dark night of the soul because it has a lot of particular connotations. So I personally like this image of this burning mountain. It's like, it's there, it's in the landscape. Also in the landscape is a generous field of wildflowers. And what happens when you can soften your gaze and like kind of look around the corner a little bit and see both that mountain and the field of wildflowers. And maybe your gaze lands a little bit more for periods of time on the field of wildflowers. And like part of that in this context, I've noticed people feel like it's bypassed to look beyond the trauma stories, to not just see ourselves in context of the ways that we've been harmed. Um, and to only cycle through grief. What happens when we also bring in aspects of joy, of the effervescence, the temporary steam of happiness, which like is not something to be gripped, but like, yeah, what happens when like it seems like bypass, it has some of the mechanics of that, but again, something I've heard JK say is like, is it bringing me into more clarity of my actual experience? And
Mhm.
do I feel equipped to actually name that and to even invite others into that clarity by communicating it? Like, I'm pissed. I didn't like that. Um, yeah, that feels profound. that feels profound because it's subtle stuff that a lot is moving too quickly for us to often like stop and really experience or pay attention to. But it could be a practice. It could be a practice to notice that, to notice where we tend to rely on the small stories and not just and talk about what's going wrong and not include the things that are going well, not include the room of rest. I feel like part of that permission really needs to include rest. Like we need seasons where we're not always investigating, and that you're not more like cool, you're not more deep, you're not more spiritual if you are persisting at all times in improvement and betterment, like understanding, because it sometimes feeds the loop. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, as always, just to note, Jen and I always talk for way longer than intended. So we will begin to hone it in. If anyone who's here live has any questions, we will open the floor at some point soon for any questions. So I'm going to name that now in case you want to be spoken to directly. And I will actually hand it back to you, Jen, because I know you were about to maybe respond to what I just said.
I think I lost it, but I'm thinking, also when it comes to kind of no, I lost it. I read the comment. I read the comment about the 10 commandments.
Oh,
A simple solution to the current life ills of the world: to go back to the 10 commandments, review them, and practice them. Voila. So, it was interesting when you were saying before, Meg, about kind of so much of spirituality is kind of remnants of the Christianity. But as we know, Christianity is remnants of all the pagan stuff before that, all the myths before that, all of these whatever the hell before that. So it's interesting that it's like these remnants, because, obviously Christian had a huge impact on everything. But as we know, all of those stories were already in ancient cultures, were already in indigenous cultures, were in Egypt, were in pre-Christian Europe, in the pagan stuff. Like all of those figures, like even the 10 commandments, it's, like the 42 laws of Mott. So it's like all of these things are these principles that kind of keep coming through. And so really it is like too, like kind of like the 10 commandments is a good aspect of it. The halls of Amenti, the Mott stuff, that is all good aspects of it that are still in remnants too. So it's pretty interesting, this kind of same thing. Everything we talked about with the spiritual stuff, the spiritual bypassing stuff is very present in all religions as well. And it's very much like, okay, the holier than thou, like the I'm God's favorite. So it's really too, I think that's probably what this next level is kind of distilling the highest aspects of, because it's all one religion. Obviously, it's all impacted by the religions that were before that, or the beliefs or the spirituality or the cultures that were before that. So I think that's kind of where the thing is like taking and the 10 commandments are very simple. Like it's very simple. Like don't kill people, don't cheat, don't steal. Like it's very simple, the 10 commandments to follow. Maybe the first one's no other god besides me. I think that too could be, it's kind of put into this way as like, okay, there's only one God and this one has to be worshiped. But really what it is like, it's all one. There's only one. Everybody is God. Everybody is the same amount of God. A person who harms children is just as much God as, someone who is Mother Teresa. So I think that kind of maybe is one of the aspects of the 10 commandments that maybe perspective, because so many of those things lead to like hate, like people seeing other gods, oh gosh, there's another god. I mean, the funny thing is too, is that like a lot of times too, like people will talk about like Allah in Islam, and then like some Christian people get super angry, like it's a different god. They're talking about the same God.
I think about a lot of these, Yes, and I'm going to expand on something. Um, in a lot of ways, each spiritual path is not necessarily actually answering the same question. I feel like this is all ancient echoes. Like we are just reveling in ancient echoes of ourselves, of the collective. And yeah, and like, maybe some of those echoes like move even further into the future. And I love this invitation about distillation. Um, I feel like a thing that I want to name that's about being careful about flattening religions to the same thing, is that what I recognize is that they're answering different consciousness projects. There's like different consciousness projects, um, that like there's a tone that can hold the multiplicity of truths, that are here, and that feels to me like the oneness. And within that tone of the multiplicity of truths, that subjective truth, that personal consciousness project truth of like, I am here to like hang out in. I'm going to move into a spirituality that like reflects devotion, and it's going to be my worldview. um, or I'm going to like be super stripped down and ascetic and sit in a room and like master myself and master the opening into a field of the mind, like in an expansive sense, not necessarily like personal mind, but also that, but like, yeah, moving into, the organizational forces of the nature of reality. Like there's different consciousness projects. And so, because I hear this a lot where like religions are saying the same thing, which is not exactly what you said. So I just want to highlight that. You said they're one, and I would agree with
Mhm.
that, but I want to nuance this a little bit of like, what if they are one and there are flavors here that actually comprise the elegance of all of what it means to really be here, and that they're not all approaching the same thing, that they're approaching different primary questions of the human experience in a lot of ways through a tone. They're all touching various aspects of all of it, but there's a tone that like is answered in almost all of the world's spiritual paths. A thing that I'll note about Christianity and its influence on current Western spirituality, there was a shift that's happened, let's say, over the course of 400 years, but really maybe in the last like couple hundred years of moving away from direct encounter, and trusting that as truth. Like somebody like Julian of Norwich, who I referenced earlier in the all is well and all is well and all manner of things shall be well, etc. Because that quote continues on beyond those 3 lines. She had direct encounter, and that was trusted and moved into the canon, like it was like so trusted, and she's a woman, so it's not like that was remarkable. Also, her works were put into print, and there's something about maybe her, I don't have this completely dropped in, so this part might need to be fact checked, but I'm pretty sure I remember that her works, her written works, were actually a primary printed thing of her time. Like that was like her ideas were widely disseminated, and that's such a big deal. And it was from her direct encounter. And the context began to get more interested in conformity, and tightened that and made it more about ritual, and also installed intercessors, where like it wasn't about somebody sharing an idea that then the community would like work with. The primary tone became, I am selected to be the intercessor between you and God. And I've been really curious about most of my life's work is about dismantling that exact thing and moving more into an energy of encounter, and this is so much of what we're talking about with identity. Like, what if I encounter myself rather than know myself? What if I encounter what's possible in another person versus thinking I know them? Because usually we build trust on what we know from prior things that have happened. What if our role more could land in a sense of openness encountering where things can be actually alive in their definitions instead of static. And yeah, I feel like that's a much more that feels like that generous wildflower field to me. That feels like life
Mhm.
actually opens up in a very different way when we move into an energy of encounter with ourselves, with each other, with the God of our hearts, with the ancestors and anything that has passed, like with the more than human world. Like what happens when we situate ourselves in a living story instead of a predetermined static one that really then becomes a problem to be solved instead of something to be experienced.
Wow. Yeah, that's really profound. This kind of concept of know thyself being kind of like the thing that everybody's like, that's mastery. Are we at it either maybe that's not the right translation, or maybe we're evolving out of that where because this is what we're talking about. To truly know yourself is to not know yourself, right? Like that's like what the real way is to truly get to know yourself is to not know yourself and allow yourself to do all the things. And then that's how you truly know yourself. That's how you truly know God. That's how you truly know the one. And I want to also like what you had said about the religions is kind of this is one and then it's different kind of perspectives and then that's what we are, right? There's one consciousness, one soul, one universe, and then we're just the little tiny fractal perspectives seeing a different version of it. So it's kind of again this microcosm, macrocosm situation.
I can't help but just see the eyes that you talked about in your Tuesday Night Live. Like, the eyes are everywhere, like perceiving all of itself.
It was a
Just
lot.
eyes. And it's true, the eyes, right? So I, and I. I as in I as in I, and I as in yes. AYE. Yes. Like
Mhm.
3 eyes. Jen, oh my gosh. Well, we're a half an hour over. I'm not seeing any questions. So if you have a question, folks who are watching, feel free to slip one in the last few minutes. I will highlight 2 practices. Actually, there's like a bajillion practices that you have named for somebody who doesn't practice things every day. But I'll highlight the 2 that have been, sort of have like tangibles, practicals of let me see if I can find him again because I just lost my to see more, to see more. And I guess I would add my flavor into this offering of like being open to encountering yourself, encountering others, encountering the God of your heart, encountering the world around you, and yeah, not just believing the surface, like not just believing what's being presented or said, which touches, even though we actually didn't get into it, it touches this conspiracy conversation
Mhm.
um, without even having to get into that. So I'll just put that there, like what it, but and maybe from a more generous stance than conspiracy can maybe lend us, because conspiracy is like who's out to get. There's a tone that's like who's out to get me, but it's like what if things just aren't as they're presenting? Like that feels like generous and actually like warm. Maybe bald to start, like maybe
Mhm.
fair to start, but like there's a generosity there of like, oh man, what if I'm not seeing everything? Rather than like, what if I'm not seeing everything? Or
Right.
I know everything, right? The extreme is being toxic. And to go, what's underneath that? Like go a step further in Jen's words. Like what happens when you notice something and then you open to like noticing more instead of landing on an answer?
Right, and they're kind of the same thing too, is like
They are.
seeing more in yourself, but then also like more in the emotions that come up, more in the triggers that come up, more in the action that's showing up, more in the person who whatever is being rude and so more in that person and then more of that experience of like,
Yeah.
okay, what is this really showing me about myself right now? What is this
Yep.
activating in me that is still alive, like old scar tissue inside?
It feels like 2 steps of a same practice. Like one is perception and one feels like an act of asking yourself.
Mhm.
And they can go hand in hand. And what I like about the perception piece is that a lot of practice for me is spontaneous. And that sounds like contradictory. Like my practice of painting, which is really touching the page of myself, I'm motivated by impulses. I'm not like, it's 9 a.m. I'm gonna sit down and paint. I'm moving with like the impulses. It's moving through my body. Like it's spontaneous. And this perception piece feels like there's room for a lot of spontaneity. And this asking yourself underneath might require a bit more intentionality. It might require a journal and some time to like sit with yourself, to go under. A writing practice that I love for this actually is proprioceptive writing. Have you ever done that?
Mm-mm.
It's so cool. You listen to some Baroque music, you light a white candle, you set a timer for 20 minutes, and you begin a free write where when you hit something that gives you a signal in your body, you ask yourself, what do I mean by? What do I mean by superiority? Okay, I mean, and you literally write that out. What do I mean by? Because
Mm.
it gives your brain enough time to like bypass the like logical answer and move into truth. And as you practice this, you get better at that, listening to those signals and honoring that as on the page. So what do I mean by superiority? I mean that it feels like the, whatever, like you can like take it further and then you can go as deep in that rabbit hole as you want to go. And when you begin to move on, then you kind of truck along until you hit the next snag and you're like, what do I mean by snag? I mean,
Mm.
and you do that for 20 minutes. And there's like a few questions that you ask yourself at the end, of which case I don't have them off of the top of my head, but they will be included in my next book. Because I love this practice. This practice is baller for getting underneath. Another writing practice that I use for this is Pantoum, because it reorganizes the narrative. So you'll write the story as you write it, and then Pantoum situates 6 of those sentences in a different order and repeats them. And so you hear a different perspective just by virtue of sentences being in a different order.
Wow.
So yeah, perception and asking yourself, like,
Right. Perception and reflection.
hey, poems.
It rhymes.
Rad. As we're coming to the end, is there anything that you would love for us to know that you're doing that we could amplify on this podcast? What are you doing that we could hop in with you on?
I have my Tuesday night live every Tuesday here on YouTube, and that's at 6 p.m. Pacific. I have a Substack where I do a monthly class, and it's a hypnosis. So we kind of dissect an issue or a topic, and then we do a hypnosis on it. Right now, I'm halfway through the Soul Architecture program. So it's a 10-month program. All of the previous ones are available. So if somebody wanted to join, they could catch up. I do the private hypnosis as the QHHT style. Right now, I'm taking a little break from that, but once I'm set up in Louisiana with a cross country move, then I'm going to be offering that again. And my book, Cannot Included, which is really about the social programming of being a woman and personal stories, and really like what we're talking about, this reflection, perception, perspective. It's really dissecting everything around modern womanhood and how we got here. And it's funny, it's relatable, and it's social commentary, it's parody, it's many different things. And yeah, so that's kind of the thing that took me so long. And one of the things that I talk about later in the book is about really like the journey of writing that book, how much it kind of is similar to what we're talking about, is like asking yourself about these things. And then now it's like that chapter is closed. It's not just the chapter, it's like the whole book is closed and now it goes on the shelf. And it's like my whole life has completely shifted and changed from the end of that. So that is like a real, like, just, and it's really relevant still, even though for me, I'm moving past this book and chapter. Every single day I see posts all day. I was watching whatever, some show, and they're talking about all the programming of women. So it's like something that is so hot right now in the collective that is still really relevant. And it's nice to see a different perspective on kind of why we are the way we are as women. And if you want to continue being that way, Sure, do it consciously. And if you want to let it go, let it go. And you can also be fluid and change and allow yourself to be different. And it's really about releasing these things that we think we had to do or needed to do or how we're supposed to be in the world. So it's very fun and freeing and relatable.
It's one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. It's so good. It's actually holding up the computer right now. I was gonna pull it out and be like, "I have my copy too," but it's holding my laptop, so can't. You're supporting me. Your
Yes.
book is supporting this conversation. Um, that's rad. Yes, please, everyone, join JK's Substack. It's such an amazing thing that you're doing there and so affordable. So if you need some like inner life assistance,
Right.
while JK is not charging bajillions, hop in now.
Right.
um, yeah, so good. Thank you. I'm gonna take a moment to promote my shit, which I never do
Please.
on my own podcast. So and actually, you can find JK's book on Amazon. And I will actually edit the live to include that link. I did include your Substack link. And also on Amazon. And this was literally at Jen's recommendation that I like move my book to Amazon, which I'm so happy with. I was never the kind of person who would have a book on Amazon. And now I am so the person who would have a book on Amazon because I live on 40 wild acres in the middle of nowhere, and getting to the post office for half of the year is not just a pain in the ass, it's impossible. So
This comes back to our conversation about kind of person and being a
exactly.
good person and all of these things. You allow
Yeah.
yourself to be free. Now
Yeah.
anybody can get your book at any time and it can
And
get
I
to
don't have to
them.
manage it. I don't have to be the kind of person who packages everything. It's so good. So I wrote a book called Don't Just Do Something, Be Here. And it's it's a workbook. It's an interactive book that guides through the first layers, like the infrastructural layers of setting up a daily or a regular practice. That's not about doing something, it's about the quality. It's about committing to finding the quality that rides underneath why you are called to do something, which really I think applies to way more than practice, but practice is just low stakes. Like painting for me, low stakes. For somebody else, high stakes. But for me, totally a place where I can practice getting activated and not being shut down by it. Like I'm like, it's paint. I can paint over it. So that's, produced a lot of resilience for me in other areas of my life. So there's this. And this year and from now on, I'm going to put out an annual practice planner, which is a much thicker deal. And it's for those of us who love to write the stories of our practice, like the marking, the tracking, but in like a soulful way, not so much in an achievement way. It's very open ended. You can get it at any point in the year because it's open date and you can hop into it. I also have a new offering in my practice, and it's a whole new shape in my practice, actually, called From the Field. And it talks a lot about this, what Jen and I have been talking about all morning, of moving out of the prescriptions of identity into a more generous reality, sourcing permission from a bigger body, and then moving into origination and creating something that has been locked underneath the I'm not a kind of person who knows how to make an album or knows how to make a body of 30 paintings or knows how to have my own business or knows how to have the life and love that I want. So if you're curious about working with me more closely, you can find more on my website at innerlifecreations.com and more about From the Field, which officially opens in September, but there's early bird perks for hopping in now.
Exciting.
Well,
Amazing stuff. You're always doing amazing stuff.
we're both manifesting generators in human design, and we're both actually the same profile. So, you know, we're just constantly, we're so superior. Sorry. Not really at all. Actually, just constantly availing myself to the process of creation. So, wow. Jen, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. It's such a pleasure to hear how you assemble thoughts and speak them so quickly, and with such depth. I'm really grateful that this world has access to your perspective and teachings. And I'm really grateful that you said yes to today's conversation on the YouTubes.
Oh, thank you, Meg. It's such a pleasure. I always love your perspective. I love that you always bring this like super crazy, insightful thing that I'm like, wow, wow. And so you definitely you wow me, and I'm so proud of you and so excited for everything that's unfolding, and you're blossoming into being a different kind of person every day.
I mean, is it weird to say ditto? Like ditto. Like, I'm proud of you, and, like, it's so amazing. Your growth is impacting so many of us, and it's really a brave thing to, like actually, this is a stance that I have. It's decolonial. It's decolonial
Mhm.
to share the process of unfolding, not so much in the energy of disclosure, but in that vulnerability of the blossoming.
Mhm.
Um, it's not like a, "I have my shit together and I was born this way." Maybe it's
Mhm.
like, no, like, it's the process of putting the makeup on, babes. Like like,
Right.
it's the process of actually doing this inner life work and continually, relinquishing and dying and burying deep enough so that, in the words of Freya, I forget the rest of her channel's name, but bury it deep enough so that when it twitches, you're not, like, dealing with the walking dead of
Mhm.
yourself, like, actually
Mm.
really letting things die, and it's been really beautiful to watch this process in your Tuesday Night Live of, like, the revelation of, the more you, the now you, the self that is, like, receiving and giving love in a marriage. So good. So good. Yeah, and to allow the changes. Thanks for letting us in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna hop off, friends. Maybe see you next month. Next month, my guest is Gabrielle Wildheart. We're gonna talk about so many things. The intersections of like the life of a professional artist and like stepping into community ministry and art as community ministry. So hoping that, you'll join us next month. And I'm going to say the thing, even though it's annoying, but if I have 50 subscribers, I only need 20 more subscribers. If there are 20 more subscribers, I can go directly to YouTube and it would be rad. So I will encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you for supporting this work of this conversation of practice.